The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched far into the distance. Hundreds of different alien species sat in their special seats, each one designed for their unique bodies. Some breathed different air, others needed special lights or temperatures. The hall buzzed with the sounds of many languages being translated through universal devices. Ambassador Taimin walked slowly to the human section. His black suit looked simple compared to the colorful robes and armor worn by other species. Many aliens looked at him with curious eyes. Some seemed amused. Humans were still new to the galaxy, and most other species thought they were weak. Taimin had been Earth's representative for 3 years now. He was a patient man with kind eyes, but he had learned to be careful. The galaxy was full of species that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years before humans even invented the wheel. They looked at humans like adults might. Look at children playing with toys. The Vorthak delegation sat in the military section. They were large reptilian creatures with thick scales and sharp teeth. Their leader, Commander Wu Sung, wore heavy armor covered in battle marks. His yellow eyes often stared at the human section with what looked like hunger. The Vorthak were known throughout the galaxy as warriors. They had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved many weaker species. Today's council meeting was about trade, routes through the outer systems. Several species wanted access to the profitable shipping lanes that connected the major worlds. The debate had been going on for hours, with each species trying to get the best deal for themselves. When it was Taimin's turn to speak, he stood up slowly. His voice was calm and reasonable as he suggested that all species should share the trade routes fairly. Many of the aliens nodded politely, but Taimin could see they thought his ideas were too simple. Commander Wu Sung laughed loudly. The sound echoed through the hall like the roar of an angry beast. "The humans want to share," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "How sweet. Perhaps we should also share our weapons with prey animals." Other Vorthak warriors joined in. The laughter. Some other species looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up to defend the humans. This was how things always went. Humans made peaceful suggestions, and stronger species mocked them. Taimin sat down without responding to the insult. He had learned that fighting with words in the council hall never helped anyone, but his eyes grew a little colder. In the highest tower of the council building, Elder Haya Jin sat in her meditation chamber. She was old, even by the standards of her long-lived species. Her skin was pale blue and seemed to glow with its own light. She had served as keeper of galactic law for over 800 years. Haya Jin was one of the few beings in the galaxy who remembered the old stories. Most species thought they were just myths and legends, but she had access to the deepest archives, the ones that contained records going back tens of thousands of years. As she watched the council meeting through her viewing screen, she felt a chill run through her ancient bones. The way the Vorthak looked at the humans reminded her of something. Something from the old warnings that had been passed down through generations of keepers. She turned to her personal archive and began searching through files that hadn't been opened in centuries. The records were fragmented and hard to read. Many had been damaged or lost over time. But slowly, pieces of an old story began to emerge. There had been another galactic civilization long ago. It had been powerful and advanced with thousands of member species. But something had destroyed it completely. The records didn't say what, only that there had been a species called the Reapers, or those who end things. The descriptions were vague, but they mentioned beings who looked peaceful and spoke of cooperation. beings who seemed weak to their enemies, beings who had small territories and simple technology, beings who were ignored and mocked by the stronger species, until someone went too far. Heejin's hands trembled as she read the fragments. The old civilization had made a rule about these beings, a rule that said they should never be pushed past a certain point, never be made truly angry, never be given a reason to stop being peaceful. But someone had broken that rule, and the entire galactic civilization had paid the price. She tried to search for more details, but most of the records from that time were gone. Only warnings remained. Warnings that spoke of complete destruction. Warnings that said the peaceful beings had wiped out not just their enemies, but everyone who had stood by and watched. Down in the council hall, the meeting was ending. The Vorthak had gotten most of what they wanted, as usual. They were already making plans to expand their territory into systems that other species claimed. Commander Wu Sung stood up and looked directly at Tae-min. "Perhaps it is time the mammals learned their place in the galaxy," he said loudly. "A small lesson might help them understand how things really work." Several other Vorthak warriors nodded and made threatening gestures. The meaning was clear. They were planning to attack human settlements. Tae-min looked up at the Vorthak commander. For just a moment, his calm expression changed. Something cold and dangerous flashed in his eyes. But it was gone so quickly that most people missed it. "We hope for peace with all species," Tae-min said quietly. "But we also remember those who choose to make themselves our enemies." Commander Wu Sung laughed again. "Threats from prey animals? How amusing." As the council session ended and the aliens began to leave, Elder Hyejin made a decision. She had to warn someone about the old rules. She had to make sure that the galaxy didn't repeat the mistakes of the past. But who would listen to warnings about myths and legends? Who would believe that the quiet, peaceful humans might be something far more dangerous than they appeared? She looked down at the council hall and saw Tae-min gathering his papers. There was something about the way he moved, something about the careful control in his actions that reminded her of the old warnings. The Vorthak were already making plans to attack human worlds. They thought it would be easy. They thought humans were weak and helpless. Elder Heejin closed her eyes and whispered an old prayer. She had a terrible feeling that the galaxy was about to learn why some rules should never be broken, why some species should never be pushed too far. The oldest rule in the galaxy was simple: never cross a human. But Commander Wu Sung had never heard that rule, and now it might be too late to teach him. The attack came at dawn on 3 human worlds at the same time. Dong-hyun was loading cargo containers onto his transport ship when the first explosions lit up the sky above New Seoul. He had been a cargo pilot for 15 years, moving supplies between the human colonies. It was peaceful work, and he liked the quiet life among the farming communities. The plasma fire came down like angry rain. Green bolts of energy crashed into buildings, turning homes into burning ruins in seconds. Dong-hyun dropped his loading equipment and ran to his ship's communication system. "Emergency broadcast to all ships and stations." He spoke quickly into his microphone. "We are under attack. Repeat, New Seoul is under attack. Multiple enemy ships in orbit. They are firing on civilian targets." His hands shook as he tried to start his ship's engines. Through his cockpit window, he could see Vorthak warships hanging in the sky like dark metal clouds. They were huge, covered in weapon systems that sparkled with deadly light. On the surface below, people were running in all directions. Dong-hyun could see families trying to reach emergency shelters, but the Vorthak were targeting those shelters. First, this wasn't a military attack. This was something much worse. Minseo heard the explosions from her classroom at New Seoul Elementary School. She was teaching her second-grade students about the different planets in human space when the building shook. At first, she thought it might be an earthquake. Then she saw the fire in the sky. "Children, we need to go to the safe room right now," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. The students looked scared, but they trusted her. They had practiced emergency drills many times. Minseo led her 23 students down the hallway toward the reinforced shelter beneath the school. Other teachers were doing the same thing, moving their classes quickly but carefully. The principal, Mr. Jun-ho, was helping coordinate the evacuation. Another explosion shook the building, closer this time. Dust fell from the ceiling, and some of the younger children started to cry. Minseo knelt down and gathered them around her. "Remember the story about the brave little star?" she asked. "How it protected all the planets around it? We're going to be brave like that star." But even as she spoke, she could hear the Vorthak weapons getting closer. The safe room might not be safe enough. Captain Hyun-woo commanded the only human military ship in the New Seoul system. The patrol vessel Daegu was small and lightly armed, designed to chase away pirates and smugglers, not fight a war. He watched his sensors in horror as 15 Vorthak warships dropped out of hyperspace around the planet. Each one was 5 times larger than his ship and carried enough firepower to level a city. "Communications, send a priority message to Earth Command," he ordered. "Tell them the Vorthak are attacking New Seoul with a full battle fleet. We are completely outnumbered." His crew of 35 looked to him for orders. They were all young people, most of them fresh from the academy. They had signed up to protect human space, but none of them had expected to face something like this. "Sir, they're targeting schools and hospitals," his weapons officer reported. "This isn't a military operation. They're trying to kill as many civilians as possible." Hyun-woo felt rage building in his chest, but he forced himself to think clearly. His ship couldn't win a fight against 15 warships, but maybe he could save some lives. "Set course for the evacuation zones," he ordered. "We'll try to cover the civilian transports." On the farming world of Jeju, Jin-ae was tending to her family's rice fields when the communication came through. She had moved to the agricultural planet 5 years ago with her husband and 2 children. It was a simple life, growing food for the other human colonies. The emergency broadcast crackled through her work radio. At first, she couldn't believe what she was hearing. An attack? On New Seoul? That was impossible. The human colonies were peaceful. They had never hurt anyone. But the reports kept coming. New Seoul was burning. The colony on Busan Station was under attack. The research facility on Incheon was gone, completely destroyed. Jin-ae ran back to her house, where her husband, Min-soo, was watching the news feeds with their children. The images on the screen were terrible. Burning cities, people running for their lives, Vorthak ships raining death from above. "Mama, why are they hurting people?" her 6-year-old daughter asked. Jin-ae didn't know how to answer. She pulled her children close and watched as her peaceful world turned into a nightmare. Back in space above New Seoul, Captain Hyun-woo's ship was fighting a hopeless battle. He had managed to shoot down 2 Vorthak fighters, but there were dozens more. His ship was badly damaged and half his crew was wounded. "Captain, we're losing power to the main engines," his engineer reported. "Hull breaches on decks 2 and 3. We can't take much more of this." Hyun-woo looked at his tactical display. 3 civilian transports were still trying to escape the arid planet, carrying hundreds of refugees. If his ship fell, those transports would be defenseless. "Transfer all power to weapons," he ordered. "Keep firing until we can't fire anymore." A massive explosion rocked his ship as Vorthak plasma cannons found their target. Emergency lights flickered throughout the bridge. Hyun-woo knew they only had minutes left. He opened a channel to Earth Command one last time. "This is Captain Hyun-woo of the patrol ship Daegu. New Seoul has fallen. The Vorthak fleet has destroyed everything. Schools, hospitals, homes. They're killing everyone they can find. This isn't war. This is genocide." The communication system died as another blast tore through his ship, but his message had been sent. In the Galactic Council chambers, news of the attacks spread quickly. Some species expressed shock and concern. Others seemed pleased that the upstart humans were being taught a lesson. A few species were already making plans to claim human territory for themselves. Ambassador Taemin received the reports in his private office. Each message was worse than the last. New Seoul, 800,000 civilians dead. Busan Station, 1.2 million killed. Incheon Research Facility, completely destroyed, no survivors. His hands were steady as he read the casualty numbers, but something had changed in his eyes. The warmth and patience that had always been there was gone, replaced by something cold and terrible. He walked to his communication console and opened a direct channel to Earth. The conversation was brief and conducted in a code that no other species could understand. Afterward, he requested an emergency session of the Galactic Council. Commander Woo Sung was celebrating with his officers when the council session was called. The attack had gone perfectly. 3 human worlds destroyed, millions of the weak mammals dead. It had been easier than he expected. Let the galaxy see what happens to those who think they can stand equal with the Vorthak Empire, he told his warriors. Perhaps other species will remember their place. The emergency council session was packed. Every species wanted to hear what had happened. Many expected the humans to beg for protection or mercy. Taemin walked to the speaker's platform. He moved differently now, with a purpose that made some of the older species feel uneasy. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but there was something underneath it that made the hall grow quiet. "Fellow members of the Galactic Council," he began. "Today, the Vorthak Empire launched unprovoked attacks on 3 human civilian colonies. They targeted schools, hospitals, and homes. They murdered 2.3 million innocent people, including children." Commander Woo Sung stood up, grinning. "The weak must learn to respect the strong," he said loudly. "Perhaps now the mammals will know their place." Taemin looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Humanity formally withdraws from all treaties and agreements with the Galactic Council, Taemin announced. "We invoke the right of species vengeance, as granted under the ancient laws. All human space is now closed to foreign vessels." He paused and looked directly at Commander Woo Sung. "As for the Vorthak Empire," he said quietly, "may whatever gods you pray to have mercy on you, because we will not." Elder Heejin felt her ancient heart skip a beat. She had found more fragments in the old archives, enough to know what was coming. The peaceful species from the old warnings had used almost exactly the same words before they had erased an entire galactic civilization from existence. The oldest rule in the galaxy was about to be enforced. The change began within hours of Taemin's announcement. Director Jae Sung sat in his office deep beneath the mountains of Earth. The room had no windows, only screens showing star maps and fleet positions. For 20 years, he had held the title of Coordinator of Human Defense Forces. Most aliens thought this meant he commanded a few patrol ships and some planetary guards. They were very wrong. Jae Sung touched a control panel and his office transformed. Hidden screens emerged from the walls, showing dozens of star systems. Each one displayed military assets that the galaxy had never seen. Shipyards hidden in asteroid fields. Weapons platforms disguised as mining stations. Fleets of warships that looked like cargo vessels. "Activate Protocol 7, he spoke into his communicator. "Authorization code, Sleeping Dragon, all assets are now weapons-free." Across human space, people who had lived quiet lives for years suddenly revealed their true purposes. So Young had worked as a maintenance engineer on the Vorthak homeworld for 5 years. Everyone thought she was just another human trying to make a living in alien space. She lived in a small apartment near the capital city's power station. Her neighbors liked her because she was always helpful and polite. She fixed their broken devices and taught their children how to speak human languages. None of them knew that she had spent those 5 years mapping every critical system on their planet. When the coded message reached her, So Young opened a hidden compartment in her apartment wall. Inside were devices that no maintenance worker should have. Molecular disruptors that could destroy metal at the atomic level. Nanoviruses designed to shut down computer systems. Explosive charges smaller than coins but powerful enough to level buildings. She looked out her window at the Vorthak city, where she had lived peacefully for years. After tonight, nothing would ever be the same. Captain Byung-ho commanded what everyone thought was an old cargo ship called the New Busan. It looked rusty and slow, the kind of vessel that hauled grain and manufactured goods between worlds. Vorthak customs officers had inspected it dozens of times over the years and found nothing suspicious. That was because the ship's true nature was hidden behind technology that made Vorthak's sensors look like toys. When the activation signal came, "Through," Byung-ho pressed his hand against a scanner that had been disguised as a coffee maker. The ship's hull began to change. Metal plates shifted and reconfigured. Weapon ports opened along the sides. The rusty exterior fell away like old paint, revealing gleaming armor underneath. In less than 10 minutes, the harmless cargo ship had become a dreadnought larger than most Vorthak battleships. Its weapon systems were based on technology that humans had developed in secret for decades. "All hands to battle stations," Byung-ho announced to his crew. "Time to stop pretending." The New Busan was one of 400 ships scattered throughout the galaxy. Each one had been hiding in plain sight, waiting for this moment. Chief Science Officer Yun-ji worked in a laboratory that officially didn't exist. Her research facility was built inside a hollow asteroid that moved through empty space between star systems. The galaxy's major powers had signed treaties banning many types of weapons: gravity bombs, nanoscale destroyers, time distortion fields. Humans had never signed those treaties. "Begin production of all restricted weapon systems," Yunji ordered her team. "Ignore all galactic conventions. We are no longer bound by their rules." Her scientists had been waiting for this day. They had spent years developing weapons that other species considered too dangerous to build. Now they had permission to use them. The first target was a Vorthak mining colony on the edge of their territory. Commander Wu Sung had left only a small garrison there, thinking it was too far away for humans to reach quickly. The attack came without warning. One moment, The Vorthak guards were laughing about the weak humans they had destroyed. The next moment, their entire base simply vanished. There was no explosion, no fire, no debris. 1 second the base existed, and the next second there was nothing but empty ground. Even the metal foundations had been erased down to the atomic level. The only thing left behind was a message burned into the planet's surface in letters a kilometer tall. New Soul Remembers. Commander Wu Sung received the report while celebrating in his command ship. At first, he thought it was a mistake. An entire military base couldn't just disappear, but the reports kept coming. Another Vorthak outpost had vanished on the other side of their territory. Then another, and another. The humans weren't conquering these places. They were erasing them completely. How are they moving so fast? Wu Sung demanded. It should take them weeks to travel between these systems. His intelligence officer looked terrified. Sir, we're detecting human ships appearing out of nowhere. They don't seem to be using normal hyperspace drives. They're just appearing. What the Vorthak didn't know was that humans had developed transportation technology based on folding space itself. While other species took days or weeks to travel between stars, human ships could cross the galaxy in hours. Elder Hai-Jin had found more pieces of the old puzzle. The archives spoke of a species that had seemed primitive to their enemies. A species that had hidden their true capabilities until someone pushed them past the breaking point. She was reading about something called the Silent War when her communication system activated. A message was coming in on a frequency that hadn't been used in thousands of years. The message was from Taemin. Honored Elder, the human ambassador said respectfully. I believe you know what is happening. Your people have records of the old times. You understand why certain rules exist. Hae-Jin's hands trembled as she answered. The warnings speak of complete destruction, of entire civilizations being wiped away. Are you truly the same species? We are their children, Taemin replied. We learned from their mistakes. We tried to be peaceful. We tried to fit in with your galactic community. But the Vorthak have reminded us why our ancestors made certain rules. Is there no way to stop this? Hae-Jin asked. The Vorthak killed our children, Taemin said quietly. They targeted our schools and hospitals. They broke the oldest rule in the galaxy. Now they will learn why that rule existed. On the Vorthak homeworld, So Young had begun her work. The planet's main power grid was protected by multiple backup systems and heavily guarded by the military. It should have been impossible for one person to damage it significantly, but So Young wasn't just one person. She was part of a network of humans who had spent years preparing for this moment. Every critical system on the planet had at least one human nearby, someone who had been patiently waiting and planning. At exactly midnight local time, they all acted at once. Power stations exploded. Communication networks went silent. Transportation systems shut down. The planet's orbital defense platforms stopped responding to commands. Within 1 hour, the most heavily defended world in the Vorthak Empire was completely helpless. So Young stood on her apartment balcony and watched the city below fall into darkness. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance, but there was no one to respond to them. The Vorthak military was trapped in their own bases, unable to communicate or coordinate. She activated her personal communicator and sent a simple message to her handler. Package delivered. The homeworld is ready for collection. In space above, the planet 3 human dreadnoughts appeared without warning. Their weapons charged up, painting the night sky with threatening light. Commander Wu Sung was trapped in his command bunker, cut off from his fleet and his government. His communication systems were dead. His sensors showed nothing but static. He had no idea what was happening outside. His last working screen flickered to life, showing a message in perfect Vorthak script. You wanted to teach humans their place in the galaxy. Class is now in session. The message was signed, "The children of those who end things." Elder Hyajin closed her ancient archives with a heavy heart. She had found the complete records now. The peaceful species from the old warnings hadn't been destroyed by their enemies. They had been the ones who brought down an entire galactic civilization when that civilization went too far. The galaxy was about to learn that lesson again, and this time, the humans had 10,000 years of planning behind them. The war lasted exactly 17 days. It wasn't really a war. Wars have battles where both sides fight each other. Wars have victories and defeats, advances and retreats. What happened to the Vorthak Empire was something else entirely. It was systematic extinction. Commander Namsu led Human Strike Fleet Alpha into the heart of Vorthak space. His ships moved through enemy territory like ghosts, appearing without warning and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Each time they struck, another piece of the Vorthak Empire simply ceased to exist. Namsu had been born on New Sol. His parents and younger sister had died in the Vorthak attack. When he looked at the target lists on his command screen, he felt no anger, no rage, just a cold certainty that these threats to humanity would be removed. Target acquired, his weapons officer reported. Vorthak Military Academy on Kepler 7. Population 50,000 cadets and instructors. Fire, Namsu ordered. The human weapons weren't like anything the galaxy had seen before. They didn't just destroy buildings or kill people. They unmade things. At the fundamental level, breaking apart the bonds that held matter together. When the light faded, there was nothing left but empty space where the academy had been. Namsu made a note in his log. Military training facility eliminated. 0 survivors. Next target. Weapons production complex on Vega 12. The Vorthak tried to fight back, but their enemies were always one step ahead. Every time they moved their fleets, the humans were already waiting. Every time they tried to communicate, with their colonies they found only silence. Young Mi sat in her research center on Luna, Earth's moon. She had spent 8 years studying Vorthak culture and psychology. She knew their language, their customs, their fears. The galaxy had thought she was just a peaceful scientist trying to understand alien life. Now she was using that knowledge to destroy them. Commander Wu Sung's family lives in the capital city, she reported to her team. His mate, 3 offspring, and his elderly parents. They live at coordinates 127.4 by 88.6 in a residential complex near the government district. She wasn't planning to hurt Wu Sung's family. That would be what the Vorthak had done to human children. Instead, she was going to show him that nowhere in the galaxy was beyond human reach. Young Mi's message was transmitted directly to Wu Sung's personal communicator, somehow reaching him even though all Vorthak communications were supposed to be blocked. "Commander," the message said in perfect Vorthak, "we know where your loved ones sleep. We know what they had for breakfast this morning. We know your mate's favorite flower and your youngest child's favorite toy. We could end them with a thought. But we are not you. Your family will live, but you will spend every remaining day of your life knowing that we allowed it." The message included detailed photographs of his family going about their daily activities, taken just hours earlier by surveillance systems the Vorthak had never detected. Wusung stared at the images with growing horror. If the humans could watch his family so closely, if they could penetrate the most secure parts of the homeworld so easily, then nowhere was safe. The psychological attack was repeated across the entire Vorthak leadership. Every general, every admiral, every government official received similar messages. The humans knew everything about them. They could strike anywhere at any time, but they chose not to. The message was clear. We are not monsters like you, but we want you to understand exactly how helpless you are. Gi-Huan piloted his stealth ship through the heavily defended space around the Vorthak capital. His vessel was no larger than a fighter craft, but it was invisible to every sensor the enemy possessed. He had trained for missions like this for 15 years, learning to move unseen through the most dangerous places in the galaxy. His target was the Vorthak War Council, meeting in their most secure bunker 5 kilometers beneath the planet's surface. The bunker was protected by energy shields, automated defenses, and an entire army division. None of that mattered. Gi-Huan's ship phased through solid matter as if it wasn't there. His insertion pod materialized inside the bunker's main conference room just as the War Council was voting on whether to surrender to the humans. The Vorthak leaders looked up in shock as a human appeared in their midst. Some reached for weapons, others tried to activate alarms. All of them froze when they saw what Gi-Huan was holding. It was a small device, no bigger than his palm, but the energy readings coming from it made their instruments scream warnings about imminent destruction. I could kill everyone in this city right now, Gi-Huan said calmly in their language. This device contains enough compressed antimatter to crack your planet's crust. Instead, I'm going to leave you with a message. He placed a small crystal on their conference table and vanished as suddenly as he had appeared. The crystal activated, projecting a hologram of Ambassador Taemin. Members of the Vorthak War Council, the hologram said, you are alive because we chose to let you live. Your families are safe because we decided they should be safe. Your planet still exists because we have not yet decided to erase it. The hologram paused, and when it continued, the voice was colder than the vacuum of space. You have 7 hours to order the complete and unconditional surrender of all Vorthak forces. If you do not, we will demonstrate what total warfare actually means. Elder Hae-Jin watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy. The Vorthak Empire was collapsing faster than anyone had thought possible. Their military was scattered and broken. Their government was paralyzed with fear. Their colonies were surrendering without being asked. But what terrified her most was the reaction of the other species. Some were calling for intervention to stop the humans. Others were already making plans to claim Vorthak territory for themselves. A few were suggesting that humanity itself should be destroyed before they became too powerful. None of them understood what they were saying. Hae-Jin had found the complete records now. The old galactic civilization hadn't been destroyed by war or natural disaster. It had been erased because they had failed to stop one species from pushing the peaceful ones too far. When the peaceful species had finished with their enemies, they had turned their attention to everyone who had stood by and watched innocents die. The entire galaxy had been judged and found wanting. That civilization had fallen 10,000 years ago. The current galactic powers had built their cultures on the ashes of the old worlds, never knowing what had really happened. Now the children of those peaceful destroyers were back, and some species were already talking about making the same mistakes their predecessors had made. On the Vorthak homeworld, So Young received new orders. The surrender had not come fast enough. It was time for the final demonstration. She walked through the dark streets of the capital city, past Vorthak citizens huddled in their homes. They were afraid, but they were still alive. The humans could have killed them all by now, but they had chosen not to. So Young reached the planetary shield generator, the massive device that protected the homeworld from asteroid impacts and orbital bombardment. It was the most heavily guarded installation on the planet. She walked past the guards as if they couldn't see her. Her stealth technology made her invisible to their eyes and their sensors. She entered the main control room where dozens of technicians were frantically trying to restore their broken communication systems. So Young placed a small device next to the shield generator's main power core. Then she walked back outside and sent a message to the human fleet in orbit. Shield generator is marked. Ready for your demonstration. In space above, the human dreadnought Incheon Vengeance charged its main weapon. The weapon was based on the same technology that powered stars. When it fired, the beam passed harmlessly through the planet's atmosphere and struck So Young's marker device. The planetary shield generator didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist, along with a perfect sphere of matter 50 meters in diameter. Around it, the message to the Vorthak government was clear. We can reach anything on your planet. We can destroy anything we choose, and your most powerful defenses cannot stop us. Commander Wu Sung sat in his bunker, staring at the surrender documents his government had prepared. Around him, his staff officers waited for his signature. The War Council had voted unanimously to end the conflict, but Wu Sung couldn't bring himself to sign. He was a warrior. His people were warriors. How could they surrender to a species they had dismissed as weak? His communication system activated one last time. Ambassador Taemin appeared on the screen, but he looked different now. The diplomatic patience was gone, replaced by something that made Wu Sung's blood run cold. Commander, Taemin said quietly, your government has voted to surrender. Your military has laid down their weapons. Your people are begging for mercy. But you haven't signed the documents. Wu Sung straightened his armor and glared at the screen. I am Vorthak. We do not surrender. To prey animals. Taemin nodded slowly. I understand. You're a warrior. You have your pride. But let me explain something to you, Commander. You didn't attack our military. You didn't target our soldiers or our weapons. You killed our children. The human's eyes seemed to glow with inner fire. When you targeted our schools and hospitals, you stopped being warriors. You became something that needs to be removed from the galaxy. We offered your people a chance to surrender. 6 months after the Vorthak Empire ceased to exist, the galaxy had learned to be very quiet around humans. Ambassador Taemin walked into the Galactic Council chambers, and the room fell silent. Representatives from hundreds of species watched, him with careful eyes. No one made jokes about weak mammals anymore. No one questioned human proposals or laughed at human ideas. When Taemin spoke, everyone listened. The Vorthak homeworld had been transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before. Where their capital city once stood, there was now a memorial park dedicated to the human victims of New Seoul, Busan Station, and Incheon Research Facility. The names of all 2.3 million dead were carved into black stone walls that stretched for kilometers. The surviving Vorthak tended the memorial. It was their job now, their only job. They had been stripped of all advanced technology and relocated to agricultural settlements scattered across their former homeworld. They grew food, maintained the memorial, and remembered what their leaders had done. Commander Wusung was gone. So were all the other Vorthak military commanders who had participated in the attacks on human civilians. They hadn't been executed or imprisoned. They had simply been erased from existence, their atoms scattered across the cosmos. The rest of their species lived under constant supervision, watched by human monitors who appeared to be simple observers, but were actually some of the most dangerous people in the galaxy. The Vorthak would never again pose a threat to anyone. Elder Hyejin had been appointed as the official keeper of human relations. It was a new position, created specifically to make sure that what happened to the Vorthak would never happen again. She stood before the assembled council and spoke in her ancient, careful voice. "Today we formally add Article Prime to Galactic Law," she announced. "The deliberate targeting of human civilian populations constitutes an act of species-level extinction. Any government, organization, or individual that commits such an act forfeits all rights to continued existence." A representative from the Altarian Federation raised a tentacle nervously. "Elder, what defines civilian populations? What about military targets? What about accidents?" Hyejin looked at him with her glowing blue eyes. "The humans have provided very clear guidelines. Military targets are facilities and personnel directly involved in warfare. Civilian targets are everything else: schools, hospitals, homes, farms, research stations not involved in weapons development. As for accidents?" She paused. "The humans understand that mistakes happen in warfare. But the Vorthak deliberately targeted civilian areas. That was not an accident." Another representative, this one from the Centauri Trade League, spoke up. "What if a species feels threatened by human expansion? What if they believe they need to defend themselves?" Taemin stood up slowly. When he spoke, his voice was calm and reasonable, just as it had always been. But now everyone knew what lay beneath that calm surface. "We have no interest in conquering other species," he said. "We want to trade, to learn, to share knowledge and culture. We will defend ourselves if attacked, but we will not start wars over territory or resources." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from every major power in the galaxy. "But if you target our children, if you bomb our schools and hospitals, if you try to commit genocide against humanity, then you will discover why our ancestors were once called those who end things." A new species had recently joined the galactic community. The Andromedans were young and eager, much like humans had been just a few years earlier. Their representative, a tall being with silver skin and large black eyes, raised her hand. "Honored Elder, we are new to galactic politics. Could you explain the other major laws we should be aware of?" Hyejin smiled gently. Over the next hour, she walked the Andromedans through hundreds of trade regulations, diplomatic protocols, and territorial agreements. She explained how to file proper documents for colonization rights, how to negotiate shipping lanes, how to resolve disputes through mediation. But at the end of her presentation, she returned to the most important rule. "Remember this above all. Else," she said, "the galaxy learned this lesson 10,000 years ago, forgot it, and had to relearn it at terrible cost. Never cross a human. Never target their civilians. Never make them choose between their principles and their survival." She gestured toward a viewing screen that showed the memorial park on the former Vorthak homeworld. The Vorthak thought humans were weak because they had only seen human diplomats and peaceful traders. They never understood that humanity's greatest strength is not their weapons or their technology. It is their capacity to become something else entirely when those they protect are threatened. The Andromedan representative looked confused. But surely humans can be reasoned with. Surely they would prefer peaceful solutions. Of course they would, Hye-jin replied. Humans love peace. They build gardens and write poetry and create beautiful art. They would prefer to solve every problem with words rather than weapons. But when someone crosses the line, when someone threatens what they hold most sacred... She paused and looked directly at the young Andromedan. When that happens, humans don't become angry or vengeful. They become a force of nature. They become something that doesn't stop until the threat is completely and permanently removed. The Vorthak Empire had 1,000,000 worlds and 1,000,000,000 ships. Now they have 1 world and no ships. That is what happens when you break the oldest rule in the galaxy. In another part of the galaxy, on a small agricultural world called New Jeju, Jinne was teaching her children how to plant rice. Her family had moved here after their original home was destroyed in the Vorthak attacks. The new settlement was peaceful and quiet, much like their old one had been. But there were differences. Human colonies now had defensive systems that most species couldn't even detect. Hidden weapons platforms, cloaked patrol ships, early warning networks that could spot threats from dozens of star systems away. Jinne's children played in the fields, laughing and chasing each other through the growing grain. They were safe now. All human children were safe now, because the galaxy had remembered why some rules should never be broken. Minho had been a student at New Seoul Elementary when the Vorthak attacked. He was one of the few survivors from his school, rescued by emergency teams just before the building collapsed. Now, 25 years old, he served as humanity's new ambassador to the Galactic Council. His presence in the chamber served as a constant reminder of what happened when the oldest rule was broken. When he spoke about trade agreements or territorial disputes, everyone listened carefully. When he smiled, other species smiled back nervously. Minho was polite and diplomatic, just as Tai Min had been. But everyone knew his story. Everyone knew that he had watched his classmates die in Vorthak plasma fire. Everyone knew that he represented not just humanity's diplomatic interests, but their very long memory. The memorial ship Remember New Seoul patrolled the space where the Vorthak Empire used to be. Captain Dong Hyun, the former cargo pilot who had broadcast the first warnings of the attack, now commanded the vessel that ensured no one forgot what had happened there. Regular delegations from other species visited the memorial park on the former Vorthak homeworld. They came to pay their respects to the human dead, but they also came to remind themselves of the consequences of crossing certain lines. They saw the Vorthak survivors tending the memorial gardens, quiet and careful in their work. They read the names of the dead carved into the black stone walls. They listened to recordings of children's voices from New Seoul Elementary, preserved forever in the memorial's archives. And they learned why the oldest rule in the galaxy existed. One day, a young species called the Helix Collective sent a diplomatic mission to the memorial. Their representative was aggressive and proud, much like the Vorthak had been. He complained that the punishment of the Vorthak was too harsh, that genocide was genocide regardless of who committed it. Dong Hyun walked with the Helix representative through the memorial gardens. They passed fountains dedicated to teachers who had died protecting their students. They saw sculptures representing families that had been erased from existence. "You think we committed genocide against the Vorthak?" Dong-hyun asked quietly. You destroyed their empire and reduced them to farmers, the Helix representative replied. How is that different from what they did to you? Dong-hyun stopped walking and pointed to a section of the memorial wall. Do you see these names? These were children. The youngest was 3 years old. The Vorthok burned her school while she was inside. He continued walking, stopping at another section. These were doctors and nurses. They were killed while trying to treat wounded civilians. The Vorthok bombed hospitals specifically to prevent anyone from being saved. The Helix representative was beginning to look uncomfortable. The difference, Dong-hyun said, is that we left them alive. We could have sterilized every Vorthok world. We could have erased their entire species from the galaxy. Instead, we gave them a chance to atone for their crimes. They live. They grow food. They remember what their leaders did, and they make sure it never happens again. He looked directly at the young alien. That is mercy. But mercy has limits. If your species, or any species, chooses to target human civilians, you will discover what happens.